welcome you to the book launch. My name is Peter Sawchuk. I'm a professor of adult education and also the associate chair for one of the sponsoring groups, which is the Department for Leadership, Higher and Adult Education. I want to begin, though, by acknowledging the sacred land on which the University of Toronto operates. It's been the site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Nipissing First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community and on this territory. I want to welcome everyone also to the launch because of this book. The other Mrs. Smith you're going to hear lots about. Having looked through reviewers' comments, it looks like it's very positively reviewed, a gem, a must-read, emotionally powerful. I'm really pleased to say I've got a copy already. It's very difficult to know how to introduce someone like Bonnie. I think she's a singular individual. But as you know, she's a successful novelist. She's foremost in my mind a tireless activist, a scholar, an educator known for her contribution to social justice and especially in the area of anti-psychiatry. And just one final reminder, it's been said once already, but due to sensory sensitivity, we ask you not to clap or to make the noise at lower levels if you can, because it can make people quite ill. Anyway, so I'd like to bring up Bonnie right now. No clapping, please.
So we are changing the agenda somewhat. We may be doing this a few times during tonight, but I was up for speaking next, and Reverend Sherry DeNovo was up for speaking later on in the late afternoon, early evening, but has another event. So I'm going to ask Sherry to talk first, and then I will introduce myself and the novel and all of that. So may I introduce Toronto, Ontario and maybe the world's finest legislator, Sherry DeNovo.
Sorry to readjust the agenda, the life of a politician. Yeah, a little quieter?
Yes,
okay. I met Bonnie when I introduced a bill, and this was many years back, to delist electroshock therapy in Ontario. Now, originally we wanted to ban electroshock therapy in Ontario, but got absolutely no support from any political party, it has to be said, for that. So then we softened it a bit and said, okay, well, at least OHIP shouldn't pay for it. And with that change, we got, okay, you can table it, not a lot of support. It did get a lot of media when it was tabled, most of it negative. As you can imagine, we were inundated with responses from the psychiatric and pharmaceutical communities, all of it, again, negative. And I got asked for a lot of interviews, which I declined to do, but instead what I suggested was that Dr. Bonnie take my place. And so there she was, many times on CBC and other media outlets, inevitably debating a psychiatrist about electroshock therapy, and always winning the debate. And here's the problem that I have as a friend of Bonnie's, as an advocate for the disability activist community and for the psychiatric survivor consumers community, is that I'm wondering what we're going to do if Bonnie ever decides to retire. I hope that day never comes and that she lives to be 150. because quite frankly, I can't imagine, and I don't know of, a better advocate. Somebody who could, at a moment's notice, have the scholarship, have the knowledge, have the ability to stand up for all of us, really, and always, always win the debate. And I was trying to think of a word to describe her as I was coming over this evening, and I think the best word for Bonnie is she is the perfect heretic. She is, I say this as a United Church minister, she is the perfect heretic, and you know, no progress is ever made without great heretics. We need great heretics and iconoclasts who will take on the power, even if they are a person, the one, to take on the many. We need that one. We need that heretic. And I can tell you that she is up against the many. And many of you, I know you, some of your faces, we've seen you at the demonstrations. We know that we get, if we're lucky, 10, 20, 30 people out some days at our demonstrations, and behind us will stand the monoliths of the entire psychiatric medical community who have millions at their disposal and all the power in the world. And I can tell you this for sure, which I tell other stakeholders on other issues, that you will win. There is no question. And at this stage of the struggle, it doesn't feel like that some days. But there is no question in my mind that it takes, of course, always the 1, the 2, the 3, the 30 up against the monoliths. It takes a small group of heretics that can topple empires. And so, Bonnie, the very best to you. There's still an empire out there. We need you to keep going until it's toppled. Thank you.
Well, hello. I think welcome to the book launch. Welcome to the premiere book launch of the novel The Others of Mrs. Smith. Does anyone know where I put my water?
Behind you.
There we go. Doris, who was a student of mine way back in Carleton, what she knew is it was always on the floor, and if people had bets as how soon would I topple it over as I walked around. Remember, Doris? Okay. Welcome to Oise, and welcome to the revolution. I first want to begin by thanking, no, I just get the water on me. I first want to begin by thanking all the people who made this day possible. I want to thank the publishers, Anana Press, Atlanta Publications. I want to thank the other sponsors, Coalition Against Psychiatric Assault, Leadership Higher in Education and Adult Education, Center for Women's Studies in Education. I want to thank the other speakers. I want to thank Sherry for making time in a very busy schedule to speak. And I want to thank all of those wonderful students, allies, activists who spent a few hours lugging all the furniture out of this room and all the new furniture in so that we could manage today. And thank all those people who did it while having to be very, very quiet so they didn't make a sick person sicker. You were wonderful. Thank you so much. We have a large agenda today, and you see we have just changed part of the agenda because someone who's supposed to go later went first. We will be making other changes in the agenda as I go along, but roughly what we have today is Sherry DeNovo speaking, me speaking and reading. So at different points, I will speak for quite a bit and read for a few passages. Then later in the evening, later in the late afternoon, I'll be reading another passage. So I will end with reading after having begun with reading. We will have a Q&A with the author. We will have a electroshock survivor speak out. And if anyone knows already they want to speak in the speak out, please feel free to take a seat in the front row so it'll be easy for you to get up. But the planners were terrific today. They figured out how to give us an aisle. We didn't have an aisle last time, so I think we're going to be all right. And then at the end, Elise Watson will speak in relation to the Bonnie Burstow Scholarship in Anti-Psychiatry. And finally, I will speak some more because I can never stop speaking. And I'll read a third passage. So today, there's 3 books in this novel, and today you will hear passages read from the first book. Well, actually, just before the first book. That's hard to explain, so I won't. The second book and the third book. So toward the beginning of the novel to the middle, closer to the middle of the novel, to closer to the end of the novel. It's a very multifaceted novel, and you'll find a lot of fascinating characters in it, like Jack, who controlled the meanest cigarette in Turtle Island. And if anyone has never set foot in a psychiatric institution, you know the only way you're going to get a good cigarette is someone knows how to roll a real mean cigarette. You will meet some very interesting homeless people. You will meet the Jewish community of North End Winnipeg. You'll meet a whole bunch of people. And some very interesting themes you'll find emerging in this novel. Themes around homelessness, themes around trans existence, themes around oppression of Indigenous people in Canada, specifically in the West, themes around identical twins, so a lot of different themes. But there is one theme that is overriding, and I don't think it surprises anyone to know that that theme is electroshock. And that is the theme that brought me to write this novel. Why did I want to write a novel about electroshock, where electroshock was so central to the novel? Well, because of the truth about electroshock. And because of truth that has not been taken in the way it needs to take it in. Because electroshock damages people profoundly. Because it destroys memory, making it hard for people to navigate their lives. Because it causes brain damage, measurable, observable brain damage. So all of those combine for reasons of why I wanted to write this novel. I wanted a novel, and when I say that it does all these problems, sometimes people say, well, maybe it used to. No, it still does. They say, well, maybe before it was, maybe now that it's new and modified, you should know the vast history of shock is the history of modified shock. My father, who was one of a shock recipients, got modified shock in the 1950s, so you can imagine what unmodified was prehistory before anyone was objecting. The issue of brain damage was never initially a deniable, it's still not a deniable claim, credibly, but it was never initially anything shock doctors denied. That's why they wanted to give shock. It was brought in as one of the, quote, brain-damaging therapeutics. That was the name given to it, along with lobotomy. Incidentally, also along with psychiatric drugs. So just so you know, the stuff today that we say is innocent was also brought in as part of brain-damaging therapeutics. It was called chemical lobotomy. And not only were they clear, the promoters, that it damages shock, that it damages the brain, they saw that as the reason then what makes it work. Let me give you a quote, because if you want to find out what people who invent things really believe about them before it becomes popular and they have to deny those beliefs, you look to what they originally said, okay? This is a quote from an early and one of the most prominent shock proponents, Abraham Myerson, Dr. Abraham Myerson, said the following: "These people have more intelligence than they can handle, and the reduction of intelligence is an important factor in the curative process." That's what we're dealing with. 20 years later, he said, there's no proof whatsoever it causes brain damage, it's safe and effective. So that became the new narrative once it wasn't okay to damage the brain. But they were always very clear, and that's what they were bringing in. They also incidentally said the same about lobotomy, safe and effective, once it was no longer popular to damage the brain. Now, when you look further into shock, you also find out a very curious fact about it, and that's that there are people who are specifically targeted for shock more than others. And so if Abraham Myerson says these people have more intelligence than they can handle, the next statistics I'm going to give you is going to tell you who these people are. Since shock was initiated in 1938, 39, depending on what country you were in, 2 to 3 times as many women as men worldwide have been given electroshock in every single decade. That's whose brains are expendable. And that's what we have to look at here. So why to write the book? I wrote this novel because of the enormous damage and because I wanted people more aware of the enormous damage. I also wrote this novel because we had come to an impasse on shock. Most people don't know that that many of us here, including Connie Neal, including Dawn White, who's sitting out there, did tremendous work on getting shock on the government agenda in the early 80s. We forced the health ministries to look at it. We forced a public investigation into shock. But let me tell you, what looked like we were winning, we did not win. The shock industry has huge money, and they fought back with, I would say, at best you could call it highly manipulative research that was dishonest and dishonest research. So, give you an example of dishonest research. If everyone who fared badly, who was most, was eliminated from the statistics of the studies, and what you were left with the people who said, yes, it seems to have helped me. No one told anyone, as they did these supposedly good scientific experiments, that the measures of effectiveness was the psychiatrist saying, oh yes, it's effective, they're not giving us any trouble anymore. Well, brain damaged people don't give people as much trouble. So anyway, it looked like we had, some of us were on the media once every week, once every 2 weeks. It looked like we had them on the run. And then we made a crucial error, which I will never make again in my life. And that's agree to ask for a public hearing, a public investigation, a public inquiry. You do that and an issue dies. 3 years later they come back and the media is no longer interested. That's essentially what happened. We were not savvy activists. And we tried in other ways, and I think they were important ways, to get this issue back on the agenda. I did a bunch of research. All sorts of other people worldwide did wonderful meta-research showing that the so-called scientific research was bogus, was absolutely bogus. And we now have hundreds and hundreds of books out on this, but it hasn't stopped electroshock. And so the issue that was coming before me is, how do we gain the momentum? And the answer is yes, of course we need to keep doing good research and writing good articles, and we'd have to keep doing demonstrations. But we need something that will once again capture the public imagination so that they say we have to get rid of this treatment. How are we doing this? How can we conceivably do this to people? And that's when I decided to write a novel from inside the head of a fictional shock survivor. And from the time you see her at the beginning of the novel wandering the corridor and not knowing who she is, where she is, or what species she belongs to, you start to see the damage, and you see it over decade after decade as she goes from a 27, 28-year-old woman to a 65-year-old woman. So this is the, you start seeing what it takes for somebody to get through their day being damaged like that, because the word damage doesn't cover what happens when you can't remember people, when you have to take notes all day long to remember the conversation you had with other people. The word damage does not come close to covering that. Okay, so anyway, once I decided to do this novel, I called Carla McCaig. And Carla McCaig, for those of you who know her, is now dead, is a shock survivor, was a shock survivor, was also a lawyer. That's an unusual combination. And was also an editor, so a very, very talented woman. And I said, Carla, I'm going to write a novel centered on shock, from inside the head of shock, fictional shock story. She said, thank God. Someone has to write it. Bonnie, write this novel. We need you to write this novel. The movement needs you to write this novel. So I committed myself to writing it, and 2.5 years later I threw up my hands in despair, because I could not write this novel. It was an impossible novel. Why? It was an impossible novel because I was inside the head of, I could tell, but she couldn't, and she was the narrator. Now if you read books on how to write a novel, somebody badly traumatized, and being in the head of someone's very traumatized, and somebody who can't remember things, is the #1 principle. Never try a novel like that. Everyone writing, telling you about what to write and not write tells you it can't be done. And so now I was seeing how it couldn't be done. And so 2.5 years later, I say, Carla, I honestly tried, but I can't do it. And she said, Bonnie, don't tell me you can't do it. You're the one who can do it. We need you to write this novel. So I went back to the drawing boards. So I went back to the drawing boards, and 2 years later, having solved one problem here, one problem there, 2 years later, I said, it really can't be done. I've never said that about anything before, but it can't be done. All the people who write about how to write novels who say it can't be done are correct. It can't be done. So, and I'm on the verge of saying, and I'm being driven crazy by it. Everything I have is a dead end because my narrator doesn't remember things. And I'm feeling I'm losing, I'm in the head of a person who can't remember things all the time, and I feel like I want my life back. And all I have to do to get my life back is to stop writing this novel. And that's what it hit me like a thunderbolt. The second I said that, it said, but shock survivors, they don't have the same option, do they? None of them have that option. They can't get their life back, and if they can't, then here's the moral imperative: neither must I. I write this novel, I find a way, and I get it written. And so this is 9 years later, and the novel is coming out. And it was very interesting writing this novel when I stopped fighting the fact that it was driving me crazy. The interesting thing about writing this novel is every impasse that was driving me crazy, because there seemed no way to do it, allowed me to understand my character better and better and better, and the novel got richer and richer and richer. So that's the novel that finally came out. Anyway, to make a long story short, somewhere into about the 7th year, I get in touch with Carla, who's dying at this point, and I say to her sister, I want to talk to Carla. And she said, Carla is way too sick to talk to anyone. I said, I know that. I promise you I will only be on the phone for a few minutes. So she said, Bonnie, you promised, go ahead, go on the phone. And I got on the phone, I said, Carla, it looks like we have a publisher. This novel is coming out. And she said, thank God. And Carla died a few weeks later. This was the last phone call I ever had with Carla. And so I dedicate this launch to Carla McKay. Anyway, I continued writing the novel, and what emerged was something really that was unpredictable, and something I feel in the end felt very, very good about. So, and when I look at it, if research by itself will not convince the public, if other things, we tend to be moved by pieces of art. Art can move in mysterious ways, and that's my hope for this novel, and that's what I set out to do. So that said, I want to begin with the first reading, and then I'll go on to the second, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So for this reading, we meet a very interesting character in the novel called Gerald. And Gerald is cleaning Naomi's house. Naomi is the central character, normally narrates from the first person, but not in this section. In this section, we are seeing Gerald, and it's the third person narration, as Gerald goes about cleaning Naomi's house. And we start to get some idea of why is this man cleaning this woman's house. So we start getting some idea about why that is. Anyway, at one point, he notices that when he's cleaning her bedroom, her binders are out of place. She has a whole series of binders, and they're all out of place. And he realizes only one person could have put those binders out of place, and he realizes how confusing it will be for Naomi. And of course, it's his very mischievous son who's put them. So he calls him up, and he scolds his son and says not to do that again. And then he starts putting the binders back where they were. That's where I'm going to pick up this reading. Now, this is a complicated reading, because what you're really hearing is memories that she has that are partly true and partly confusion and partly a whole bunch of things mixed together, which is, so how are you to understand it? First, let me suggest, a lot of it is like poetry, so take it as poetry. If you take it as poetry, you will be able to figure out what's happening. You will be able to get a sense of what's happening, even if it's not a straightforward sense. The other thing is, be aware that the past gets mixed in as she remembers things. And so if you recognize and think you recognize movies from the 1970s, international movies like Bergman or Truffaut, yes you are. So assume that you're just hearing it correctly. If you also think you are seeing something that sounds or looks like electroshock, yes you are, okay? So if you just keep those in mind, I think you can follow this part that I'm going to read right now. That said, at one point he's going to start reading from her binder. So first we're going to hear him say things, think things, and then he's going to start reading from her binder. The second he starts reading his binder, I'm going to do two caps. Can you hear that? Okay. The binder is divided into sections, so every time a section ends in another beginning, I'm going to do one tap. And then, when he's finished reading from the binder, there'll be two taps to let you know we're going back to the narrative of Gerald. Okay. Alone once again with the binders, Gerald adjusted his collar. Adjusted his collar, and began arranging them in order. Black binder number 1 on the far left, then black binder number 2, then a space for black binder number 3, then the 3 red binders, then the yellow binders, then the green, then the orange. Good, he told himself. Mission accomplished. No, mission not yet accomplished. He turned around, approached black binder number 3, picked it up, and stared at it sidely. Taped to the front cover was an index card which read, Memories, Thoughts, October 2nd, 1971 to January the 29th, 1973. Gerald nodded with recognition as he took in these words, then began flipping through the pages. Well, it was a 4-inch binder. They could easily have accommodated over 100, 200 pages. He didn't have long to flip, for precious few had been inserted. Realizing how unlikely it was anything new had been added, he closed the binder and started to slip it back into place. Something, however, drew him back. Despite the fact that he knew everything inside that binder more or less by heart, he had typed a fair part of it for Naomi and pored over it with her many a Sunday morning over crumpets and tea. Something always drew Gerald back to black binder number 3. And so it is, Gerald took a break from his labor, pulled out the binder again, sat down on a chair, and began to read. Well, the binder held almost 1.5 years of Naomi's memories, and so might be reasonably expected to cover many items, great and small. This, only this, is what Gerald found. Pound, pound, pound. Adonai, Mary, Mother of God, Buddha, Ishtar, Inanna, Allah, anyone with ears that receive and a heart that quickens, make it stop. Pound, pound, pound. I swear on the Holy Torah. I swear on the blessed cross. I swear on the winds that lift up and the rivers that tumble from the Creator's bountiful lips. I will do anything. Do this, and lo, I will walk through the rest of my days humbly revering thy name. I will set up a table for thee in the presence of mine enemies. Night and day will I sing hallelujah. My knees flat against the earth, my eyes lowered, my hands brought together in prayer. I will press the horn of a ram to my grateful lips and issue a call to all corners of the earth. And the sweet young children, innocence dripping from their milky breath, will come running, running, running toward the sea, and we will all join hands and ascend to the glorious orchard. Then we will gather together and sing. Then we will gather together in the New Jerusalem and sing hymns in thy praise. But please, I beseech thee, make it stop. Make it stop. Pound, pound, pound. Where is that room where pain is born? A glimmer of someone hovering. Like a headshot taken from below. Could it mean? No, don't want it. Don't do it, please. Not another one. Pound, pound, pound. Hammer. Now I'm getting somewhere. That's what I'm feeling. The relentless blow of a hammer. A hammer is smashing my head into smithereens. But not from the outside, I remember. There were these lights, sizzling lights. Then there was a 3 count, or was that a 10 count? Then later, possibly centuries later, this hammer began striking again and again and again. Into the room the wheels go. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Lightly, lightly, lights, lights, action! An eerie smell in the air, as if a tin plate had been accidentally left on a red-hot burner. Bloated bodies dressed in white floating over me. Something cold and sticky on my temples. Something rubbery in my mouth. A band pressing in around my head, uncomfortable, uncomfortable. Straps wrapped around my legs, shoulders, torso. Just relax. This won't hurt a bit, says a voice, as a needle punctures my arm. Come on now, stop fighting us. There's nothing to be scared of. Count backward from 10 and you will be fine. 10, 9, 8. Oh my God! Can't move a muscle, no way to breathe. How could they not know? A chilly morning, somewhere in a distant galaxy. Freezing toes peeping out of a meager gown, inching their way down the bare concrete floor. The sound of a fork clinking against a plate. The unmistakable scent of freshly brewed coffee. Hey, no breakfast for you today, Naomi. And don't forget to take your hair clips out. How come I'm getting nothing? Yes, yes, I've been here before. Who knows in what year, lifetime, incarnation. They'll be prepping me again soon, and soon mind, body, and that mysterious thing they call a soul will get sucked into this vacuum, and I will be back in the fog. Pound, pound, pound. After this jackass of a schoolmaster picked on me, after I was caught trying to return the Underwood typewriter I had foolishly stolen, after 400 blows and more, I escaped from the performatory and ran for miles, my boyish arms swinging nimbly at my side, just like a professional athlete. Faster, faster, faster! Till I found myself at the sea and stood there staring silently into the waters, my head lowered, realizing there was nowhere to go. My eyes are swollen. I am flat on my back. I glance to the side, hoping to get my bearings. I can't make out much, but it's clear that I'm lying on something that resembles a stretcher. To one side, through a doorway with no door, is a room with a scattering of people milling about. I can hear something or someone crying in that other room. Can fake out giggling. A tale fit for winter is being told in a lisping, mellow voice. There is a wall on the other side of me. Nothing on the wall indicates where I am. What country, city, town is this? And what manner of people are meeting in that other room? Eyes peer at me, then quickly look away. Because they are afraid, because they sense the humiliation, because they know not what else to do. Stretchers in front of me, stretchers behind me, some poor soul being dragged where none of us want to go. Who could have thought that a single shriek could fill the universe? Everyone has a name, an identity, and past. And if everyone else has, so must I. What am I called? And why is everything always such a blur? And where is she? Where? One touch, two touches. Where? Pound, pound, pound. I am a teenage boy who stole a typewriter. Maybe, maybe not. But if I'm not a teenage boy who stole a typewriter, who am I? Perhaps the silent Mrs. Vogler. But if I am the silent Mrs. Vogler, where is Sister Alma? And why are so many people milling about when Sister Alma and I are supposed to be cloistered together in a cabin for the summer, just the two of us? If I could just catch a break. Maybe I could, if I could just stop that infernal pound, pound, pound. What am I? I am a totally blank wall. All the while that Gerald was reading, his face was calm, his gaze steady. Now the time was when he would have shaken his head in dismay, when he would have objected that the woman had never been crazy and cried out, "So why?" But not today. He simply took each passage one by one, scrutinizing them, repeating the odd word aloud, pausing to consider. Once he came to the end, He pulled a corn pipe from his side pocket, then a tobacco pouch. The sweet odor of overripe apple instantly greeted his nostrils as he lifted the flap. He smelled it, nodded, filled the pipe, tapped down on the tobacco, added some more. Then he just sat there, sucking on the unlit pipe, his eyes keen, his heart determined. He was proud of what Nomi had achieved and was intent on doing whatever he could to help her accomplish more. But it wasn't this that made Gerald's eyes sharpen. There was something of monumental importance in this binder, not on the surface so much as tucked away. Something in the words, or underneath the words. Something beyond the obvious, beyond the anguish, the damage, the terror, the sheer stupidity of it all. And maybe not today. And maybe not tomorrow. But sure as his name was Gerald Smith, sooner or later he was going to find it. So that's, as you can see, there is trauma in this novel. There is also humor in this novel. And there's humor from Northern Winnipeg Jews, there's humor from the Mad community, and there's no humor quite like Mad humor. So the second passage I want to read is a passage of Mad humor. So picture this. Everyone is in the cafeteria of St. Patrick's, St. Andrew's Mental Health Center, known to everyone, all the patients there, as St. Pukes. So they're all congregated in the cafeteria, and the staff has just done something rather, unaware. Let me put it politely. A nurse has just appeared, coming to get, help people get their food, and around her neck is the key that locks and unlocks the locked ward. So if you've never seen that, nurses used to go around as if it were a piece of jewelry, wearing the keys, and you can imagine what that does to people. And so one of the patients reached out for the key, asking, is this the key that unlocks the gates to paradise? And of course, all hell breaks loose. And they dragged the patient off in disgrace, and now they're going to pump him full of drugs, etc. And so all of the other patients who saw it coming and couldn't stop it, they're sitting there downcast, and they don't know what to do, except this turns around. So here is reading number 2. Strange. Countless times before, our fellows were hauled off in disgrace, and countless times before, we watched on powerless. Now this was no Hollywood movie. Clearly, we inmates hadn't a snowball's chance in hell of taking over the institution. One of our own had been snatched away from under our very nose, however, and this time, we were not going to take it lying down. Now, there are protests, and there are protests, yes. "Hey, Zelda," I called out, raising my voice loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Wouldn't you say that staff are a tad obsessive-compulsive when it comes to keys?" Catching on quickly, for the woman was nobody's fool, Zelda's eyes instantly lit up. "Indubitably," she answers, "and not with just keys. They're textbook cases of that they're obsessive-compulsive. Child, just look at their standard MO. Habitual note-taking, frenetic checking of files. They're paranoid also, dear heart," she quickly tacks on, a twinkle in her eye, "and we all know what that's a symptom of." "Oh no, not the dreaded S," I exclaimed, cowering in mock terror. "Better be careful they don't overhear us," I add. "Wouldn't want to reinforce their delusion that people are talking about them." "You know," Brad offers, "they act out all the time. Mouthing off, assault, causing bodily harm, antisocial types with aggressive tendencies, wouldn't you say?" Even the women, pipes up Emily unexpectedly, because they carry on much like the men. Sperms with perms, that's right, isn't it? I stare at Emily in amazement, not enthusiastically, then cast my eyes about. Face after face is breaking into a grin, waves of gaiety blossoming on a formerly bleak shore. The banter continues with a few surprisingly knowledgeable patients, poking fun at what I can only imagine were some of the more esoteric diagnoses. Transient situational disorder, observes Irv Riley. What's that mean? That your car's on the fritz and you're having a bad day? What geniuses dream up stuff junk like that? All of them. Even put it to a vote, answers Brad authoritatively. But it seems to me only when they're constipated. Say what? Only stands to reason. When a guy's straining for a shit, any shit'll do. Gross! Calls out a teenager, putting her finger in her mouth and pretending to hurl. Objection! Objection! Protests a naysayer, raising his hand. They're men of science. They don't invent diagnoses out of thin air. The hell they don't, Brad retorts. Smartass, you think it's that easy? You try. A glint enters Brad's eye, and with several newly acquired admirers cheering him on, he rises to his feet, then, much to our delight, rises to the occasion. Uno momento, urges Brad, holding up a single finger. The name's compulsive diagnosing. He specifies second later, assuming an air of mock superiority. Population most at risk? Mental health professionals. The higher up the professional, the more susceptible. It is characterized by a mania for labels, progressive alienation from the Queen's English, pathological ignorance of the human condition. Oh yeah, and get this, he adds with a mischievous grin, an almost irresistible urge to act like an arrogant asshole. As Brad winds up, we all nod. When a good half and barely has he finished, when a good half the table begins speculating on which hapless staff member is afflicted with the most dire case of this disorder, several putting forth their own therapists, and not unconvincingly. My giddy aunt, to think on most days Dr. H looks as normal as the rest of us, declares Robina, an elderly woman with silver blue hair. You never know, do you? As Brad takes his well-earned bow, peals of laughter ripple through the cafeteria. Shortly thereafter, Nurse Ann returns, and the table goes quiet. Inevitably, once again, several of my sisters and brothers begin to drift away, this time with just a hint of a swagger. Now I'm about to take my leave as well, when a patient called Nora catches my eye. That takes us into a whole new narrative, and I won't go there. So what I'm going to do next is go to the Q&A. After the Q&A, we'll hear from a few other people, and then after that, I will say some more words and do another reading. The Q&A, we're open, people. What would you like to ask about electroshock, about the novel, about what you're doing here, or any of that? I'm open to the questions.
Hello, Barney.
Yes.
This is what do they primarily give people ECT for? Is it primarily for schizophrenics, or do they just give it whole hog for anything and everything? And what kind of alternatives would you suggest?
So let me just rephrase the question. If you asked me what is the alternative to hitting someone over the head by a 2x4, the first thing I would want to say is not hitting them over the head with a 2x4, so I would never use the language of alternatives. That said, allegedly, it's given for depression. What is its effectiveness in dealing with depression? It is no more effective than placebo. It has no effectiveness. And I shouldn't say no more effective than placebo. There's even a reason to think it's less than effective than placebo. Let me tell you about shock machine that stirred up the imagination because it was so successful in dealing with depression. Okay, it was in the early 70s, and it was in England, and they didn't understand what was it about this shock machine that it was more effective. What was it about this shock machine that people got better, and it was truly effective, because whatever it is, and for years they couldn't figure it out until after about 5-6 years. They did an experiment and discovered the shock machine wasn't working. Nothing was happening to people. That's why it was more effective. It was placebo, pure and simple, and placebo outperforms. And guess what? No one gets brain damage from placebo. So they give it to certain people irrespective. One of the claims is that why are women electroshocked 2 to 3 times as often as men? Because women are more depressed than men. that women are more depressed, but the answer is not getting rid of electroshock, it's changing sex in society so women don't feel so depressed. That said, let me tell you a curious thing that will not uphold this issue of depression. Women were given 2 to 3 times